Hello and welcome to today's broadcast. I'm going to be talking about Christian Sinema's abrupt switch this morning from being registered as a Democrat, having run as a Democrat and won election to a Senate seat in Arizona as a Democrat, switching affiliation to independent this morning. But she promises that she will caucus with Dems, and as far as I understand it, this will not interfere with the fact that Chuck Schumer has already been re-elected to the position of Senate Majority Leader yesterday. So Sinema can irritate as many people as she wants and draw attention to herself as much as she likes, but it would appear that the status quo, at least for the next 2 years, is relatively unchanged. Now, does Sinema plan to try and hold the Democratic Party hostage, i.e. don't run a candidate against me in Arizona, otherwise I'll start caucusing with Republicans? Who knows what type of hostage schemes that she has potentially cooked up. But I will not let her be the thief of joy for me at the moment, because I'm still relishing in Senator Raphael Warnock's fourth election victory in the last 2 years. He's won a position as senator for Georgia 4 times. So once in an election that was so close it led to a runoff, and then again, so in 2020, and then again in 2022. He's won 2 elections. He beat Herschel Walker the first time, and then he beat Herschel Walker in the runoff election that we just had on December the 6th. So thanks for tuning in to any replay viewers. I'm working on a sequence of notes for an introductory phrase. So that's a work in progress for an introductory musical phrase. How's everybody? What I'm going to be looking at now, I think, is some of the moral panic on right-wing Twitter. And there's an article that I'll take a look at. We can look at it together on The Atlantic about why anti-trans sentiment is linked to the far right. This is a really important issue to talk about, because politics involves building power through bringing people together, and that often involves building coalitions of groups which don't necessarily see eye to eye about everything, but finding a common cause and advancing their political coalition, and therefore their political influence, their ability to build a critical mass of people all voting the same way. And a lot of feminists, hardcore feminists, are being seduced by a strictly, what is it called? Like a biological naturalistic fallacy that says people shouldn't be able to be gender fluid, it's encroaching on women's rights, et cetera, if you have people who are able to say, I feel like I'm a woman, so I want to adopt that gender for myself. I want to be a woman, therefore I am a woman, and nebulous standards to that effect. To my mind, living in a free country, it's okay for people to adopt a gender presentation that allies with how they feel and think. And similarly, as a non-practicing Jewish person, I would never disdain a convert to the Jewish religion and say, you are less authentic, you're not properly Jewish, you haven't suffered with us. I wouldn't ever want to say that to someone. It's cliquey, and it's using exclusion in a way that harms others. Now, just because I accept trans people doesn't mean I always have to agree with every single trans person. And just because I defend them, that doesn't mean I'm morally responsible for every action, good or bad, that they take. I think because people don't operate collectively, and I think that's the moral concern sometimes people have. They're hesitant to defend trans people because they don't want to get involved in something when they think, well, there could be a harmful outcome for one person, and then I would feel that I'd supported a bad cause. You've got to zoom out, big picture. people are very unlikely to be attacked in a toilet by a trans person. There are far more cis-normative, heterosexual, straight, gender, what's the opposite of fluid? Gender inflexible people who stalk toilets, stalk quiet places, because they have a sense of entitlement and ambition to perpetrate acts of violence and sexual assault against others. And that's not a function of somebody. That's not a function that is allied automatically with the wish to be fluid in your gender presentation. So let's have a look a little bit at this Libs of TikTok issue, because Libs of TikTok is a Twitter account that got suspended a lot under hate speech rules and incitement to violence, because they frequently run campaigns that encourage people to conflate the issue of child grooming and child assault and child mutilation with children who receive treatment for gender dysmorphia at hospitals. So there are hospitals that, because of their inclusive policies, their willingness to address children who have a history of saying that they feel that they're in a body that motivates them to socially transition and potentially at some point medically transition, those hospitals have been targeted with bomb threats. And certainly the rate of hate speech has gone up on Twitter towards trans people, Black people, Jewish people, etc., since Elon Musk has taken over the helm of Twitter. So that should really tell you something. If you're tempted as a feminist, as a white boundary policing feminist, to ally yourself with a movement that is denigrating Jews, a movement that denigrates non-Christian people, a movement that denigrates migrants, the far right, which can be said to include most of the right in modern politics. They've been radicalized. Hoods that were on have come off. I will say Trump is a product of right-wing media, or his instincts and intuitions are a product of watching a lot of Fox. He knows how to amplify the message of Fox. He knows how to be like a symbiotic parasite of the right-wing media, to feed on it, but also to grow it and support it. And so, of course, that shifting protective umbrella of the far right, today they might be saying, yes, white Christian nationalists are under this umbrella, and so is anybody who allies with us. And so a certain number of a notable minority of ambitious Black people like Candace Owens, Senator Tim Scott, now deceased former Republican Herman Cain. He didn't renounce his republicanism, but his affiliation with Trump and his attendance at a Trump rally as a cancer survivor was likely a precipitating factor in his death from COVID in 2020. So those people, sometimes at great personal cost, as was the case for Herman Cain, will ally themselves with the political right and insist or exploit that element of identity politics that has people take a step back and say, historically speaking, since the Civil Rights Act was signed in 1963, the parties reversed their positions. The Republican Party became the party that sought and got the support of racists, people with whether a conscious or an unconscious fervent attachment to the status quo of white dominance. And resisted any efforts to broaden the applicability of civil rights so that all those who lived in America, Black Americans as well as white Americans, received the full protection of the law. And that's an ongoing campaign. You can't say that it's been achieved yet when there's still statistical evidence as well as very potent anecdotal evidence of Black Americans being disproportionately targeted by brutal police activity. When I say anecdotally, it's very potent that people were able to see for themselves the callousness with which then police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on the neck of George Floyd for 9 minutes, whilst people were recording him in public, whilst people were asking him to stop and pointing out that George Floyd's life was in danger, that he was at risk of being killed by Chauvin's actions. And nevertheless, he persisted with not just a callous disregard for George Floyd's life, but what appeared to be a firm intent to cause his death. Because you don't kneel on somebody's neck until they've stopped breathing, and even then continue to kneel unless that's the outcome you're trying to put in effect. And yes, the Democratic Party did not begin to be the party of advocating for equal rights for enslaved people and post-enslaved people, but they became the party that, having taken a step forward in a moral sense, continued then to be the party to look to for at least an effort to make America live up to its ideals. And the Republican Party has sought to gain political advantage, sought to make a political home in the implicit and explicit ideology of not changing things and opposing people who have the audacity to advocate for civil rights and the audacity to kneel during the singing of the American anthem. So the Republican Party has been the party opposing momentum and change, and the Democratic Party has been perceived as being the home of allyship and inclusion. Hi, Christopher. Thanks for joining today. Lovely to see you. I have been talking at length about how people who are seduced by anti-trans arguments really need to interrogate their motives and look closely at who they're allying themselves with. Because the right wing of politics at the moment is employing age-old tactics to induce moral panic, to conquer through division, and to bring feminists into a coalition with people who are fundamentally and frequently sexist, and as well as racist and anti-trans and anti-migrant. They are the party of pursuing power through magnifying and exploiting the worst human tendencies, the tendency to get your risk calculation calculator all messed up by tribalistic prejudices that make you susceptible to the othering of minority groups, whether they be Jews, whether they be Mexican, people of Mexican background, whether they be Black Americans. Any of us is in danger of being excluded from the tent of so-called authentic Americans that the Republican Party seeks to style themselves as the passionate advocates for. Veterans might think they're in the tent of protection from the Republican Party, but veterans often have legislation that would help them voted against by a majority of Republican congressmen and women. So it's an illusory protective umbrella as well. So I urge people to question themselves if they feel that temptation to group with those people that have that promise of an umbrella. And they say it's fun here under the umbrella. We can point out at the people we've designated to stay in the rain, and we can call them less than, and we can burnish our own self-image and our own sense of self-worth by denigrating other people based on their membership in a group. So I know there is a quote from Rod Starling, the creator of The Twilight Zone. I think he said something about the source of all human ill, and his daughter posted the quote. Oh, there's a lot of quotes. Okay, human ill tendency to look down on others. Oh, he's got a lot of quotes, evidently. Hollywood's a nice place to live if you're a grapefruit. Great quote, but not irrelevant. For civilization to survive, the human race has to remain civilized. This is true. All right, what if I find his daughter's account on Twitter? Look at that. Does anybody else have any good news that they would like to share from today? All right, so his daughter's name is Anne Serling. That's nice. She has a biography of her father called As I Knew Him. I'd love to interview her. Oh, here we go. I found the quote. He was quoted in the LA Times in 1967. I think that the singular evil of our time is prejudice. It is from this evil that all other evils grow and multiply. In almost everything I've written, there is a thread of this, a man's seemingly palpable need to dislike someone other than himself. So, what a quote. Thank you, Rod Serling. So I was miswriting his name. Serling. I think that the singular evil of our time is prejudice. Man's seemingly palpable need to dislike someone other than himself. And someone like Donald Trump cultivates all of the material that he gets from Fox. So he knows as an enthusiastic consumer of Fox style anti-cohesion propaganda. I'd say anti-American propaganda, but there's parts of America, like the KKK, that are as old as apple pie, and we can't be ignorant that racism and prejudice is a very enduring and very authentic part of the United States. And indeed the world. There is a very enduring, almost palpable need for men and women to dislike someone other than themselves. And they will latch on to any straws. And a fascist leader is someone who is very adept at handing out those straws and has functioned a system of transaction whereby they gain political power and influence from handing out such straws, and when they have a sufficient bundle of them, use them to whip democracy from the room. So the word fascist derives from, I think, a Latin word meaning bundle. And it was used by someone to describe an uprising by some Sicilian peasants against landowners, which sounds kind of communist, actually. But Mussolini picked up the word and ran with it to describe his new system of government that involved inflaming patriotism into a toxic state of patriotism and disdain for others, inflaming man's palpable need to dislike someone other than himself. So not using patriotism to help motivate the citizenry to do good. No, motivate the citizenry to worship one specific person and conflate that one person or support for that one person with support for their country. To bundle together the concept of one leader and the whole country, so that people who criticize that leader are then accused of being insufficiently patriotic and are targeted as political enemies and are often attacked with violence, whether that be violently uprooted from their homes and sent to camps or beaten in the streets. We've all learned about fascism a bit today, haven't we? I will bring it up a source for what I've been saying so that we are all sure we're learning from good sources. That's a key. Wikipedia has some definitions. And it's asking me for some money, which is only fair. Wikipedia deserves $2 at least, but now is not the moment for me. Okay, fascism, according to Wikipedia, is a far-right, authoritarian, ultra-nationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy, subordination of individual interests for the perceived good of the nation and race, and strong regimentation of society and the economy. Well, that's interesting because from my perspective, Trump has certainly been cultivating fascist impulses in America. But America is hyper-individualistic to a large degree, and the American right is also wedded at a philosophical level to the idea of individual freedom. But I think the flip side of that dedication to promoting individual rights, it may bring with it some type of yearning for a more collective ethos, that they yearn for an ability to look around and see themselves as a community of like-minded people working together, to have some solidarity that in some cases overrides individual freedom. And that's because there's an inauthenticity to that hyper-individualism, because the insistence on people's rights and freedoms is often very selectively applied in the real world of day-to-day life in the United States. And as an example, I will illustrate the right to carry, because this so-called right to carry that's adopted by many states does not hold when it comes to Black Americans. So Black American men and Black American children have frequently been shot by police officers within seconds of being cited. A man in a Walmart just picking up a toy rifle or a rifle to examine it for purchase. Philandro Castile, who was trying to explain that he had a license to carry, was shot by a police officer in his car. Tamir Rice, was he 12 or 14? He was so young. We'll look up his age because, Tamir Rice's age. It was 12. Tamir Rice, age 12, was killed in Cleveland, Ohio, by a 26-year-old white police officer. Rice was carrying a toy gun. And the police officer shot him almost immediately upon arriving on the scene. So this story is one example that illustrates the falsity of the claim that America must endure all of the inconveniences of hyper-individualism because it's so protective of the right of individuals. And the thing is, it's clearly not true. The rights of individuals are not well protected if people are Black in the United States. Breonna Taylor's home was invaded by police operating under a falsely obtained warrant, no-knock warrant, for someone who didn't live with her, for someone who she didn't have any dealings with. And that violation of her rights is not the exception that proves the rule holds. It is not an exception. It is part of a pattern that illustrates the existence of two rules. And that second rule is that anything goes approach is frequently adopted by police officers in the United States, that the problem is endemic and needs to be addressed. And that it is evident that Republican elected officials do not have the intention or the will to address those problems, because it is a political advantage for them to mischaracterize democratic efforts at reform and instead accuse them of being soft on crime and soft on criminals and indulgent, overly indulgent, particularly to appeal to voters who have falsely conflated the idea of criminals in the United States and Black Americans. So they are brainwashed to a large degree, intentionally brainwashed by right-wing media sources that abuse their audience by oh yes, you're right, it's time, I have to go, but by forcibly playing all the CTV footage they can get their hands on if the perpetrator is Black. So they do not put the same focus on crimes committed by white people, but they are selling a racist agenda to their audience. The audience is culpable for whatever degree they are personally susceptible to that message, but people have documented instances of even their tolerant parents who had friends who were Black, who had friends who were gay, retiring and suddenly consuming Fox News regularly and then becoming vitriolically racist, vitriolically resentful of gay people and Black people and feminists and anybody whom Fox hammers home as the villains of modern America. So my message is today for people to continue to look up definitions of democracy and politics and fascism and find the words to build your own confidence in communicating with others, the need to join a decency coalition, to take an interest in joining with others who want to protect civilization, want to protect it from that nihilistic drag on human rights, on human activity that happens when a ball of fascism begins to gather speed and roll down the hill, because it is a downwards trajectory and it is contagious. It does pick up people as it rolls along, and it requires a lot of work, a lot of collective action and collective self-education and group education in order to address it. Oh, Craig, you've just joined and I'm leaving, but thank you so much for joining, and I hope you can enjoy the replay. Thank you to any replay viewers. Thank you to any new people who drop in. Hi, Ms. O, if you ever see this show. And yes, thank you to anybody who's invested their time to watch me talk today. I hope I've lit something to inspire people to read further. And I'll close out just with that quote from Rod Serling one more time, because it's really informing my actions and my thinking today. I think that the singular evil of our time is prejudice. It is from this evil that all other evils grow and multiply. In almost everything I've written, there is a thread of this: a man's seemingly palpable need to dislike someone other than himself. And the final quote will be from present-day poet Amanda Gorman, who said, "There is always light if we are brave enough to see it, if we are brave enough to be it." And that was from a poem she read at Biden's inauguration on January the 21st of 2021, a momentous time in American history, following close on the heels of the coup attempt by Trump and his followers on January the 6th. Let that day and the terrors of that day continue to motivate us to work to protect democracy and consequently our communities and our families. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Craig and Christopher. Have a great day. Bye.